A pastor of a congregation had some work that needed to be done in the community, specifically a new roof. So he looked around and he realized that there was a particular gentleman in the congregation that had a lot of resources, and he said, well, maybe I'll go to him and ask him for a large gift in order that we can put the roof on. And so he went to him and he said, oh, we have this need, there's a leak and whatnot. And so, and the pastor said, our records indicate that, maybe you could perhaps give a little bit more and perhaps contribute to this project. And the man looked at him and said, well, Pastor, what your records do not indicate is that we have, in my family, I have a mother who's very sick and has medical bills. I have a brother who recently lost his job. And I also have a sister who is raising 6 children on her own. The pastor felt terrible. He felt very small. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that was going on. And the man said, well, Pastor, there's no need to apologize, actually. I haven't given any of them a dime. Why do you think I'm going to give anything to you? Now, that is not the spirit of generosity that the Lord is looking to emulate in the readings today. Rather, what he is speaking about is a gift of generosity and a sacrifice which comes from the heart, and a generosity which is elicited because we realize the blessings that we have in our life. We're able to recognize the gifts that have come from God, and we give thanks for them. And that was the case as both in our first reading and in our gospel. As Jesus, and also in the first reading, we hear about how it is 2 widows that are upheld, 2 widows that are shown to be of great generosity. And it's kind of interesting because in biblical times, the widows were really very much outcast from society. Sometimes they did not get the inheritance from their husbands. They also were considered to be very alone, and also others shunned them. So even today, when we have sometimes situations where widows have hard times, it was even more difficult back then because of the culture that existed. And so really specifically in the gospel, Jesus upholds the widow and says, look at the widow who came into the temple who didn't have much of anything, but she gave so much of herself. She gave the little that she had. In the first reading, it was a gift of hospitality. It was the fact that all she had was some flour and just a little bit of water. That was all that was left. But she gave it to Elijah to eat, not for her and her son. And so really the message that's there is that, when we give to others, we also receive back in return. And both of these people, both widows, had a great trust in God. They had a great trust in God. I will tell you, I always have that great trust as well as a priest and really as a pastor, because I realize that I trust in you as a congregation, that you will look at what the resources you have, what they are, think about what they are, and make sure that you respond in an appropriate manner, in a generous manner. So today I say thank you to you for that. Thank you for your generosity, obviously, because we have a large campus here, and keeping our campus up, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of resources, and so I'm always grateful to you for your generosity and also for your prayers, for the support that you give here to our parish. And I trust that you will continue, obviously, that generosity. It's really very remarkable for us when we again see in our lives the blessings that God has given to us, and how is it that we return those blessings? Because if we keep everything for ourselves, well, then we kind of become very just short-sighted. And you see, the person that only fills up for themselves is going to feel very empty when we only receive but we do not give. So God asks us to be able to give in a prayerful, in a planned, and in a very proportionate type of manner. Now, our giving is obviously something that is beyond money and resources, as is talked about in the gospel. Our giving is also the manner in which we give of other things that we have. For instance, our generosity of our gratitude. A lot of times, generosity period starts with people being thankful. During this month of November, we have this opportunity to have Thanksgiving in just about 10 days. And no matter really what's happened in our lives this year, no matter what has gone on, each one of us can find something along the line to say, Lord, thank you for this. Thank you for some blessing in our life. Thank you. When we look at the world with grateful eyes, we can then be more generous in the manner in which we operate, the manner in which we see things, the manner in which we give of ourselves. And so gratitude is really where a lot of generosity begins, is being thankful. And I especially say that to our young people, to our children, and also to teenagers, because sometimes our young people think it's all about receiving. It's all about getting. What's coming up? You know, in just a couple of weeks, we're going to have Christmas, and I know some young people maybe think, well, what am I going to get this year? Already thinking about that, you know, without maybe being cognizant of challenging economic times. Really, instead, I would ask our young people to think about your families and be thankful to God for something in your life. Be thankful to God for many things, but before we are able to ask for something, perhaps we need first to give thanks for something too. I know in the sacristy before Mass now, sometimes we stop, we always pray and say a prayer before we come and begin Mass. One of the things we've done a few times now is to go around and for each of the people, the servers or the readers, to say one thing that they're grateful for. I have to tell you, it's very beautiful to hear from our young people what they're grateful for, besides their families. But it's wonderful to hear being grateful for their education and wondering about how they're going to be able to, I'm sure, use that for the betterment of our world. So gratitude is something that is so important. Something else that we don't think about often in the manner in which we give is of our time. How is it that we spend our time? You know, it's very easy to be a couch potato. It's very easy to sit back and watch TV, and sure, that's all in good form and being able to kind of relax. I think God wants us to relax. But we can really relax best when we know we've also spent our time and shared our time in a good way. Perhaps it's sharing our time with someone who needs us. Perhaps sharing our time just being with somebody, maybe having an open ear or listening to them. I know that sometimes in the manner in which we go about our life each day, you know, we get very caught up in the busyness of life, very caught up without realizing maybe the people in our life who are just waiting maybe for a phone call, maybe who need a sense of encouragement or that listening ear. I know oftentimes as well, if you were to go to the hospice here or to the hospital or to a nursing home, you can walk the halls. Rarely do you see empty rooms of people in the beds, but you don't always see people visiting. You don't always see people there with them, and I know we all have our lives to go about and to do, but it's very important to make sure that we care for those who may need us. And I can tell you as a priest that sometimes when I'm called to go to the hospital or a nursing home and to be with someone, I don't know what to say always. You know, they train us in the seminary to have a ministry, not always of words, but a ministry of presence. So if you're wondering like what you can offer maybe to an aunt or an uncle who might be living alone, maybe what you can offer to a neighbor perhaps down the street who maybe you haven't seen for a while, I wonder if it would be just going and seeing if they need anything, just stopping to say hello. That's being generous with ourselves and with our time. I wonder if Jesus used the widows as examples because they didn't have much, but they gave a lot. In the same way, Jesus didn't have much. You know, he didn't leave the world with palaces, with great riches, but what he left the world was himself. And what he gave was all of himself. And Jesus gave the best of himself. He didn't cheat us out of anything. So he gave of that beautiful person that he was. And that's what we're also asked to give. I also think about a child, a baby. Everybody loves a baby. Everybody loves a child. You know, when you bring a baby into a room and there's a newborn maybe in your family or Everybody loves to look at the baby and to hold the baby. I love the way that people melt when there's a child there, because they just bring such a sense of joy, a sense of peace. But also think about what the child is giving. A little baby who's so dependent. Babies are totally dependent. They really take a lot of effort and a lot of time, but they also give a lot too. What they give is the gift of love. What they give is the gift of unconditional love. What they give is the sense of a selfless type of love. And maybe that's what our scriptures today are calling us to do, is to be a little bit outside of ourselves and to think of another. Because if all we look to do is fill our cup, I can assure you it's going to be pretty empty. We're going to feel pretty empty. And when we finally, in this earth, think about all the things you might do for yourself, all the things maybe you've given to yourself or that you've bought for yourself, maybe all the things, the time maybe that you've spent just always on your own. And there's proportion in our life and balance. It's very important. But when we die, all the things that we've done for ourselves or that we have purchased or bought for ourselves, they all die with us. They die with us. The things we've given to others, they stay eternally. And they stay here in the world forever. And most especially, that is the gift of our love, the gift of our time, the gift of who we are as people. The more of it that we share, then the more the world gets to enjoy it as well.